As you can tell, Brian is very, very engaged and very, very passionate about the work that the Summit is doing, and he's provided tremendous leadership to the Summit. And Madam Mayor, thank you very much for being our honorary chair, and your involvement and engagement and support around this has been tremendous, so thank you very much. So, Human Services Task Force. Here we go. So I'd like to introduce Jerry Townsend and Paula DeCoito, who are the co-chairs of our Human Services Task Force. If they could stand, please. Thank you very much. Now, the Human Services Task Force came out of the issue that we had talked about at the 2007 summit, was that given the kind of growth that we're experiencing in our community, the fact that we have over 11,000 new residents coming to our community every year, and we've experienced this kind of growth for the past 20 years, the development of our human services hasn't kept pace. And as a result of that, the quality of life of people in our community are being affected by that. We've got 21% of Mississauga children living in poverty. We don't have enough programs and services in each one of our neighborhoods for children and youth to access, to help them achieve their potential. We know that our seniors population is growing rapidly, and in fact, one of the fastest elements of our seniors population that is growing is that group that are 85 years of age and over. And so obviously we need to put services in place in our community to ensure that their needs and their families' needs are being met. So this is an area that we obviously need to build more capacity in terms of, and I know that this is a priority for the City of Mississauga. If you look at their pillars, we know that one of their pillars is to complete our communities in Mississauga. So there is tremendous alignment. And research indicates that there are many challenges in our communities. There's been excellent data and mapping done of our neighborhoods throughout Mississauga that identifies what are the assets in each of those communities, but are also what are some of the developmental needs in those communities so that they can be as strong and as supportive as possible. So the big idea that this group came up with, and they actually came up with two big ideas. This was the group that had the 7-6 vote. One big idea was the neighborhood development. The other big idea was developing the community door, a center where we would have a number of human service organizations under one roof so that it was easy for people to access, and it was located, well situated along public transportation thoroughfares so they were easily accessible. Also, that by bringing these agencies together and they'd be able to share back office services, etc., it would actually reduce their operating costs, and that they'd be able to invest more of their dollars into direct service delivery. The good news is, although the group, the task force, only selected one big idea to move forward because they felt it was very important to follow the rules, that the second big idea, I'm happy to say, is advancing under the leadership of Winston Meyer, who is here with us. And actually, we're opening the first community door, and Mayor McCallion, I'm very, very sorry, we really did try to open the first community door in Mississauga. But the first community door is opening in Brampton in January of 2011, but I promise you, Mississauga will be soon to follow. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much, and she has been working on her lease, and we really appreciate that. So the big idea is to strengthen neighborhoods, and actually this has been a strategy that has been implemented in other communities worldwide. It was implemented in Scotland to address their issues around poverty reduction, in Boston to address their issues around deteriorating neighborhoods, and then there was an initiative that was implemented a few years ago across Canada called Action for Neighborhood Change, and it was implemented in Vancouver, Surrey, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Halifax, Toronto, and Montreal and Thunder Bay. And there's actually an excellent website called Action for Neighborhood Change. I believe it's anc.ca. It provides examples of the kind of resident-led neighborhood change that has occurred in these communities and how transformational this change has been. And this is the kind of model that this initiative is proposing, and that it will systematically identify what are the demographics, who lives in these neighborhoods, What are the assets that those neighborhoods possess, but what are some of the needs that they have? Work with the residents in those neighborhoods to identify what are some initiatives that, if they lead them, will actually transform and strengthen these neighborhoods. We know that the research shows that this is a very, very powerful and successful way of transforming neighborhoods and addressing key social issues. So this is the big idea from the Human Services Task Force. The last, but certainly not least, task force is the Center for Excellence in Diversity and Immigration, and the co-chairs are Dr. Colin Saldana and Julie Pehar. If you could stand, please. And we know, so I don't know how many of you know, but Peel is the second largest recipient of new immigrants in Canada. Now, people don't know that because our statistics, our data is included in the Toronto CMA. But when you pull the numbers out, the amount of immigration that we have is actually greater than Montreal and Vancouver. We're the second largest region for immigrants. And we also know that it's taking about 7 to 10 years for our new immigrants to integrate into our community, despite the fact that the majority of them are foreign trained professionals, extremely well educated, coming to our country with more than one post-secondary degree or diploma or certificate. And they have left everything behind in their country, just demonstrated tremendous courage to come to our country because of the wonderful quality of life and the opportunities that could be available to our community. The Conference Board of Canada tells us that we are losing out, as Canadians, approximately $14 billion in economic revenue because we're not utilizing the skills and capabilities of our foreign trained professionals. So we want to change that. And this is what this particular task force has worked on. And so it's looking at increasing employment, increasing the inclusion and integration, improving the host receptivity of our community, and by creating a Council for Diversity and Inclusion that will be, and the Council will be the place to go for the development, establishment, and implementation of diversity policies, procedures, and systems that will lead public education, market the potential diversity that diversity brings us, and work across a cross-section of industries to determine benchmarks and measurable outcomes. So, and we see this as having tremendous impact on our economic development, our social and cultural environment, and our civic engagement of our residents. We believe very, very strongly, this particular task force believes very strongly that Mississauga could be the first city in the world to demonstrate how well our new immigrants and our diversity can be put to the best possible use to optimize the potential of our community. There isn't a place in the world that has managed to do this well yet, and we have tremendous opportunity to do that. Not to mention the tremendous economic outcomes that this could have for our community in terms of reaching out and establishing relationships with global markets. So we see this as being an extremely exciting and important part of the city of Mississauga. So that's that particular task force. So those are the 4 task forces, and as Brian mentioned, there's actually a 5th task force that developed following that, the employment and the work task force, and we're going to ensure that we continue to include and integrate their work. The purpose of today's meeting, as Brian initially stated, is to bring together the allies and stakeholders for each of these task forces so that you have the opportunity to discuss your role in rolling out the big ideas, what you need to do to engage your organizations in playing a role in these particular task forces and the kind of timeline that you would need, so that we can, before we go public with these big ideas in the next few months, that we can be certain that we've got all the people who need to be engaged involved, and so that they can be successful. So that's the purpose of today. So in terms of the next steps, we're going to gather the key stakeholders, conduct one-on-one meetings following today with specific potential partners, and develop the implementation strategy so that as we go public, we're very, very clear on where we're going next. So what we need you to do as a result of hearing the direction of each of these, what the big ideas are, is identify which task force you have alignment with. And in a few moments, I'm going to ask Carol Kataka to come down and tell you which breakout rooms each of the task forces are going to, so that you can be part of that conversation for the next hour or so. And that was, tonight we wanted to ensure that you had lots of opportunity for discussion. So in terms of, before we close off, there's a couple thank yous that I want to make. First of all, we couldn't have done all this work without the task force co-chairs, the task force members, and our logistics coordinators. Our logistics coordinators have done an absolutely fabulous job of keeping everybody on the task forces informed of what's happened at each meeting, of informing them of meetings that are coming up, and keeping and maintaining the connectivity during this process. And so I'd like to ask all the logistics coordinators to please stand and allow us to recognize you for your tremendous contribution. Thank you. Thank you so, so much.